Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. Sorry for the slight delay. We were waiting for our MEP, who is of course hosting us. I'm Mariam Zaidi, and welcome to the Active Citizen Network debate, supported by the MEP Interest Group, European Patient Rights and Cross-Border Healthcare, under the patronage, of course, of the Czech presidency. Now, this afternoon, as you can see it on the screens, we'll be discussing securing equitable patient access to advanced therapies across Europe. Welcome to all of you who are, of course, in the room, and to everyone who is joining us online. A few things to people in the room. First of all, translation is being provided for Italian and English. For Italian, it's channel 1, and for English, it's channel 2. And if you do have any questions or comments that you'd like to put to any of our panelists, please feel free to do so. We will take your questions later on in the programme for our debate. Okay, so advanced therapy medicinal products, ATMPs, are non-traditional medicines through biological processes that provide really groundbreaking innovation for the treatment and prevention of a range of long-term genetic or oncological diseases, things like cancer. They are a high-cost investment per patient, but they are sustainable, a one-shot approach to healthcare. Now, over the next few hours, you're going to hear from all of our experts online and in the room, who are going to argue in their favour why ATMPs are good and better for the patient, for them to have access to them. Our experts on this panel believe that in the long term, ATMPs provide more economical solutions for healthcare systems, especially those who are, of course, struggling financially and overburdened because of the pandemic. And just before I came here, I did put on my social media that I was going to be debating something on ATMPs, and what people said, the comments I got were, okay, that's great, ATMPs, fantastic, but do you think member states, do you think that healthcare systems are actually going to, advocate for ATMPs? What are the solutions? Well, hopefully you're going to find out how it can actually all be financed. But before, of course, we hear from our experts, we're going to have some introductory remarks on EU policy and ATMPs from our MEP Tomislav Sokol, who, of course, is the co-chair of the MEP Interest Group, European Patient Rights on Cross-Border Healthcare. Please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad that I can host you here in the European Parliament on this very important topic. And this is especially important because I always try to be as honest as possible. So healthcare has not traditionally been one of the priorities of the Brussels bubble. Let's be perfectly honest, up until the COVID-19 pandemic and the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, this was really a marginal topic here. Unfortunately, usually the reason for this was that everybody said that this was a national competence, that the EU does not have a really role to play, etc. But I think these two developments that I mentioned, so the COVID pandemic obviously, but also the political initiative from the EPP during 2019 parliamentary elections campaign on the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, which resulted in the creation of this plan, has really shown us that there are problems which the European Union can resolve, which member states cannot resolve by themselves in the area of healthcare. And of course, when there is a kind of a political will to solve these problems, which member states cannot resolve by themselves, we always find a legal way. So either we use Article 114 on internal market, or we extensively interpret Article 168 of the Treaty on Healthcare, etc. But anyway, if there is a political consensus or kind of a broad opinion that we need to resolve something on European level in the area of healthcare, then legally a way is always found. I'm a lawyer, I'm a professor of European law, so trust me on this. But what is now important is that we keep this debate going, that we keep the momentum, because healthcare has been in the focus of EU in the last couple of years. But this is now changing. New topics are coming up, especially the war in Ukraine, and energy crisis, again, migration is one of the permanent topics that we are dealing with here. So now we are losing kind of already this momentum, this focus, this emphasis on healthcare here in Brussels, and this is why we need to keep it going. So this is why these kind of events are important, so that this debate is going on, and also that we connect it to some concrete things that will be developed. And of course, that's primarily the revision of pharma legislation, which I think is the most important thing in relation to ATMPs in the coming year. So I think this is why I'm glad to host this, and I will just briefly say something what I think is important about the EU role on healthcare and the advanced therapy medicinal products in general. So So first, when we speak of what EU can do, I think we have to divide make a distinction between two things. One is the financial instruments, and the other are regulatory instruments. When we speak of financial instruments, obviously we speak mostly about Horizon. So Horizon, which is the EU program for funding research, and here healthcare has become much more important than before. Healthcare is one of the priorities officially of Horizon. Beating cancer has become one of the priority policy missions of the new Horizon. So this shows that definitely European Union funding will be provided, especially when we speak about basic research, which is not financially, commercially viable, but which is the basis for everything else, which is usually done by universities and public bodies. And here that the European Union definitely has a role to play, and this is also very important when we speak about advanced products as well. But I think what is even more important is what's going on in the regulatory framework. And here I would like to emphasize a few things which I think are important. So first, here again, I think we have to make distinctions between two aspects which are regulated here. When we speak of access and introduction of new medicinal products on the market, here European Union has a very strong role to play. We have Article 168, which specifically has specific reference to introduction of new medicine of new medicines on the market, and here EU has the strongest competence, of course, through EMA and through EMA procedures. Of course, this has been utilized by the creation of the legislation, of the pharma legislation, especially on orphan drugs and pediatrics. And I think this is something very important. You probably know that that this has been a bit delayed. We expect the Commission proposal probably in February, March next year, we hope, in the first half of next year, definitely. And I think this legislation is probably the most important one, especially the orphan drugs regulation, which has proved to be very influential. But now we have to see what we can do to actually use it, to update it, and to make it even stronger, and to create stronger incentives for introduction of new medicines into the market. What I think, my position here is that we cannot do this without the industry. It's politically very attractive to attack industry and blame industry for all the problems. They are not perfect. They are there to make a profit, obviously. But I think if we think that we can develop new advanced medicinal products without the pharmaceutical industry, that this idea is delusional. I think that's impossible. So we have to see how to create and strengthen the incentives that we already have, but also to streamline these incentives for research innovation into the right direction. And I think one good idea that I heard, and I think this is something that this is definitely a good direction, is to actually differentiate the incentives in terms of market exclusivity, particularly in terms of what kind of medicines and what kind of new products we want. So if something is really innovative, that it's logical that we stimulate and create incentives to develop this kind of products with a longer period of market exclusivity than something which has already been developed, at least partly, which is only adding something to something already existing, etc. So I think that this idea to have more diversified market exclusivity guarantee for really innovative medicines I think that's one of the good ideas, and I think this is a direction that should be taken in this respect. Of course, I won't go into detail on this, but I think this is the kind of approach to really diversify between different types of medicines, because market exclusivity for everything the same period, I think that does not create strong enough incentives to create something really innovative. So that was my first point. The second point that we are also working on, and that's something which is particularly close to me, is the European Health Data Space Regulation. The proposal was presented by the Commission in May. Then it had some problems in terms of determining the lead committee here in the Parliament. First, they gave it to the LIBE Committee on Civil Liberties, which, if it stayed like this, that would have been a big problem, because of course, privacy protection is important, data protection is important, etc. But with LIBE, I think the balance would be too much towards that, and actually not really focused on what we want to achieve with this regulation, and that is to actually to create an interoperable system where to make it possible for data to be used and shared. So the main purpose should be to make it possible that we share the data across the member states between healthcare providers, but also for secondary use, which here is crucial for research and innovation, and not just to create additional obstacles. Thankfully, after long negotiations, we were able to secure that we have a joint lead on this, so both ENVI and LIBE committee. I was appointed recently the ENVI rapporteur on this, and I will do what I can to really make this regulation work. We'll see how it will play out. It will take some time. We are just starting the concrete work on the amendments on the report. Of course, after that we will have the vote in both committees, then the plenary, then the trialogue with the Council and the Commission. But I'm confident, and I think we can adopt the final version of the regulation by the end of next year. I think that is the realistic timeline. So to finish everything, not just the Parliament's part, but also negotiations with the Council and the Commission. And here, secondary use of data is crucial because whenever I had discussions about research innovation and the problems that are being faced there, the lack of data and the limitations in using data was always earmarked as one of the biggest problems. So I think that with this regulation, we will be able to facilitate the secondary use of data for research purposes, and of course, this will be crucial for development of advanced therapies as well. In addition to this, so this is what you can do and what is doing. Unfortunately, we had some missed opportunities as well, like the HTA regulation, which was adopted, but the final compromise was, I think, a big missed opportunity. Why? Because the whole idea of the HTA regulation was to create a common European system of health technology assessment to substitute the 27 national ones, but in the end, because of the opposition of the member states in the Council, now we added the 28th system to the existing national 27. And I think this is very unfortunate. I think this will only create additional obstacles in administration on HTA, and I'm afraid that this will not result in what we wanted to achieve, to create common European system of health technology assessment. And so that's the European part, and also the national part. Of course, that's the second big topic. That's pricing and reimbursement. You know that financing and organization and management of healthcare system is a national competence. That's explicitly stated in the treaty. But I think here also we can do more in terms of facilitating transparency of national systems, which are really in many member states not transparent, where we don't know the criteria which are being used when determining what is being reimbursed according to what principles, etc. Unfortunately, here we actually have European legislation on this. We have the Transparency Directive from 1989, which is, as I said, 33 years old, never been amended. Always member states prevented this from happening. And I think this is a big problem, because this directive is really outdated and does not provide the guarantees that we need, that national systems of deciding on what will be covered by health insurance are transparent and objective enough. So I think that we can do more on this. I think we need a new directive which would regulate this, set some common principles on European level. I think we have the competence to do that. But of course, this is something that will be very hard to do. But it's important to keep the discussion going. And one last point: when you speak of access, obviously one of the problems when you speak of also pricing and reimbursement, that not all member states pay the same price for the medicines, especially very expensive ones. This is something that we discussed a lot here also in the Parliament. There are several ideas how to tackle this issue. One idea is to have a joint procurement of expensive medicines, especially for rare diseases. So to have one common European procurement system, which would strengthen the negotiating position of the public authorities when they buy medicines. Of course, there are some other ideas. The industry, or at least part of the industry, are floating the idea that instead of this, they will adapt the prices to the individual member states and their economic position and possibilities to cover these medicines. We'll see what happens with this. But this is also definitely one important topic to discuss, because what we cannot have in Europe is first and second class citizens. So we cannot have the situation that some expensive medicines are covered by health insurance, provided free of charge for the patients in some member states, but not in the others. And here, and especially, we cannot allow that this kind of East-West divide here develops or that it is strengthened. So we have to really do something about this, that all patients in Europe have access to same or similar advanced medicines, especially advanced medicines, which are usually very expensive, and this creates a big problem for the budgets of member states. So to sum up, I think these are some concrete things that are going on European level. Also some problems which I think have to be tackled. We will not be able to tackle all of this in this mandate, obviously, but I think it's important, as I said, to keep the discussion going, to have this kind of events, to hear what stakeholders have to say, and maybe also for us as policymakers to get some ideas. So thank you. I hope I wasn't too long. I'm sorry I won't be able to be here the entire time, but I'll try to do my best to come back in the end to give some concluding remarks, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. May I ask you one follow-up question?
Yeah.
Well, you talked about you highlighted bottlenecks, a change of approach. You talked about the first and second-class citizens. But what sort of guarantees can MEPs themselves actually give to citizens, and how do you balance sort of need versus expectation?
We cannot give any guarantees because first the problem is that when we want to make European legislation, we depend on the Commission. So the Commission is the one who formally proposes legislation. We can put the pressure on them. We can ask from them to actually make a proposal, but formally we are dependent on them. So we cannot make guarantees. And of course, so that's the first hurdle, and then the last hurdle, and that's always where the main problem is in the end, and that's the Council. So the member states are actually the problem, not all of them, but it's very hard to get the qualified majority without the big member states. And some big member states, I won't name them, are usually the ones who are most reluctant to give more power to the EU in the area of healthcare. And this is, I think, where we have to put the strongest pressure on. Of course, what I can guarantee that I'll do my best to do what I can within the possibilities that I do have, within the powers that I do have, to put the pressure on the Commission, also on the member states. But in the end, the member states, some member states are the biggest problem, and I cannot guarantee that they will in the end be constructive on this, of course. But that's why it's important to have this also, to have all the stakeholders also who work here on European level, but also to put pressure on the national governments to get things done. So without these synergies of both national and European level, it's impossible to get European legislation adopted.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so you've heard the sort of EU policy angle. Let's now hear from Mario Novota, who's the director of the Active Citizen Network, on why ATP access is in the common good for European citizens. Please.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon, and welcome to everyone, also from my side. It's also a pleasure to meet you in this institutional venue. And for our first event in presence after the pandemic, I want to thank the member of the European Parliament, Tomislav Sokol, always very sensitive when the topic affects the condition of patients across Europe and the protection of their rights. The speed at which research is advancing and the projection we have from the European Medicine Agency regarding future approvals of new advanced therapies screeches with the slow pace of decision, for which every day of waiting frustrates the more than legitimate expectation of increased number of patients across Europe. Today we are asking, or we are trying to ask, to policymakers for a commitment to keep up, while we will leave it to experts to make a proposal of how to do so. As anticipated also in our introductory documents, we will not talk today about research, clinical trials in the field of advanced therapies, nor about translational medicine. We will not deal with pre-market aspect today, but with the sustainability of advanced therapy once the research is finished. Let us project ourselves into a post-market dimension, with the therapeutic options coming onto the market and having to be reimbursed by national health systems. In this regard, when it comes to advanced therapies, we speak of reimbursement in terms of potentially eligible population, as opposed to budget constraints, a narrative that inevitably undermines patients' fair access to such therapies, for reasons mostly related to cost containment. hence the issues of sustainability and access to advanced therapy, which we will try to address today thanks to the experts who have invited, a whom we thank in advance. Experts, first and foremost in economic issues, indispensable for approaching the complexity of the topic we wish to raise today. They are going to illustrate a potential economic accounting solution for all stakeholders involved, of which I take no credit at all, but I'm happy to contribute to making it known to the audience of a leader of civic and patient advocacy groups, like we have done last May in a European seminar, to disseminate with a positioning document as the call to action that we have received today, and of course to present it for the first time to the European institutions and the relevant stakeholders through today's meeting. In particular, also highlighting the call to action endorsed by 43 civic and patient organizations that I thank, some of them here or connected, we can probably show their logos. The issues of advanced therapy is related at least to the following patient right, recognized by the European Charter on Patient Rights, a very relevant milestone for those who advocate for the respect of patient rights across Europe. Of course, the patient right to access to care, but also the patient's right to personalized medicine, the patient's right to be informed, to information, and the patient's right to innovation, to access innovation. About it, for sure, innovation is an essential principle for everyone involved in health. And the principle of innovation is also, from my side, linked to the principle of equity and homogeneity of access to care. Access that must be equal throughout the territories. As you know, the cost of this technology are high, so that access by patients is often hindered by public health budget limits. All are aware about it. But how to combine the above-mentioned patient right in this new challenging context? More than ever, in order to avoid the risk that patients' needs remain totally invisible in this dark period we are going through, it is therefore time for a paradigm shift to which the institutions are called. Of course, I want to thank in advance those representatives of the institutions who have accepted to join us today. We believe that the relevance of these innovative therapies places them at the center of the discussion on health and health policy choices for the future and the sustainability of each national health system across Europe. This will pose very delicate problems of choice and rationing in terms of access to treatment for patients, which could result in the treatment of fewer number of patients than eligible and therefore potentially treatable. A solution in terms of identifying the resources necessary to finance them must therefore be taken today so as not to arrive unprepared tomorrow. Bearing in mind once again the starting point of the today meeting is the fact that the traditional reimbursement and budgeting schemes are not more able to amortize the value of advanced therapy. Please let me thank in advance the moderator, Mariam Zaidi, international news presenter, reporter, and expert on European Union issues. So she's the right person to chair our event today. Thank you again.
Well, I hope I am. Thank you so much. And thank you also for setting out your stall. Okay, well, let's now go over to our keynote speaker. I invite Mario Murray, Professor of Public Economics at the University of Trisha and Louise University and member of the Independent Vita Expert Group, to take the floor. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I have to introduce the argument, the discussion. First of all, let me thank all the organizer, Mr. Sokol, MEP Interest Group on European Patient Rights, Mariano Vota, Active Citizenship Network, and Vita Coalition for organizing this conference. It's a pleasure for me to be here today and to discuss with you some issues, some very, I would say, hot issue on health economics and public finances. My main message I would try to be brief, also if someone told me to be long, not brief anyway. But teaching after 30 years, like my colleague Giorgio Leva, you understand when it's time to go to the conclusion and to say simply very precise message. The main message is that we have experienced in the last 2-3 years a lot of very important changes in the economic sector, and especially in the health sector. And these changes as provided that some nature of, for example, heat treatment and heat goods show much more and more the characteristic of investment. Now, this is the discussion of investment. What is the investment? How to define? Who is going to define? How to properly account an investment is a very long-standing issue in my topic. I teach public economics. So don't worry, I will not go to the Adam Smith time or very, very old discussion. But that's a very, very important point. So let's start. And I would say that SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 show that healthcare is a fundamental investment for country economics and for sustainability of any European country. The key point, as already mentioned, is that health expenditure are a very clear investment characteristics. What is the investment characteristic? They show a flow of costs and benefits that spread across time. The problem that I will try to discuss to make clear and to address this point, given the current budgeting procedure, all the costs are accounted initially, all the costs in the 1 year, the first year, while we have to take into consideration also the flow of benefits that produce and spread across time in many years. Because of course, if we accept that the investment is health is as a characteristic of investment, then we have to combine to match the two parts of the investment, the cost and the benefit. We could say in the document that we wrote last year with Vita Coalition that expenditure on advanced therapy can be assimilated, at least in part, to gross fixed capital formation, but also to, for example, I will leave this part to more technical part to my colleague Giorgio Leva, who was the chairman of the Italian Central Statistical Office. Let's say intangible, human capital, RD, I don't know. So there is a lot of possibility. Next, thank you. The distinction between current capital expenditure. Sorry, I have to read because it's very far from me to see anything from my slide. Anyway, no, it's true. I don't know you, but for me it's my fault. It's
very small. It is
very
small.
I choose 20 as font. 2022. Think if I made the bad decision to opt for 16 or 17, usually for my slide at the university. Anyway, the distinction between current capital expenditure is not an easy task. It's the same like the definition of investment. It is a very long-standing issue. Going back to the blackboard, usually is controversial, is debatable, but the key point is the different duration of the effect of the any goods. Quoting the Italian national account, but the Italian national account are the same of European national account, an expenditure or a goods is current if the economic utility of goods and service ends within the same annual budget process, while the goods or the expenditure is capital when the economic effect lasts more than 1 year. That is to say, tend to produce multi-annual benefit. If we have a look at the Italian public account, okay, it's a problem. There is a chair very complicated, so.
This room isn't helping you much today, is it?
No, I already adjust my chair because it was very, something like that, so it was, anyway, it's better the way, it's okay?
Yeah.
It's okay? Okay. If we have a look at the Italian public accounting rules, MEF stands for Ministry of Economy and Finance, Italian Ministry of Economy and Finance, but I mean the European budgetary accounting rules. Investment expenditure identify all the expenditure that directly or indirectly affect the formation of national, physical, and human capital. Now, in the last 30 years, less than 30 years more or less, we have had two major episodes of revision of the system of national accounts. In the 1993, the system of national account, the UN system of national account, decided the scope of investment at that time, 1993, was expanded to include software, mining exploration, arts, and valuable expenses. In 2008, the scope of the investment was further expanded to include, that's a very important point, R&D and defense expenditure, military expenditure. So, according to the same UN system of national account of 2008, in 2010, the European system of account defined that the research and development and military expenditure are in nature, I'm quoting, so they are recorded as a gross fixed capital formation no longer as a current expenditure. Now, there is a point that borrowed from my colleague, my friend Giorgio Leva. If we define military expenditure, defense expenditure, as an investment, that is to say that a bullet, a hand grenade, a tank is an investment. I realize that in the current time with the Ukrainian war may be an investment. But so we are saying a bullet is an investment that is going to be deployed, completely destroyed in the process of utilization in health therapy or mechanism or other particular approach for the health of people is not an investment. I think this is a very crucial point that we got to discuss, to think on about it. Now, number 4, no, sorry, yeah, no, okay. Some figures, on very short figures on the ATMP. We have, by 2030, we will have up to 60, at least that's are the projections, 60 new genetic and cell therapies, and the different studies show that maybe the number of potential, the patient potentially eligible should be something like more than 300,000, the number 300,000. What is the another very important point, that usually ATMPs are very expensive. They show a very high cost. And of course, it is a key challenge for the budgetary requirement and also for the health system. Of course, this cost in front of an increasing demand for therapies will raise some sensitive issue in terms of our choice and rationing, in the sense that who is going to define, who is going to define the access of different patients, who is going to decide who is going to be treated, how, that's a very, very, very difficult issue and arise some sort of moral dilemma. Anyway, here there are some points to be brief, some point of that allied stress the value of ATMPs. They are curative, they concern only limited population, they require only a single administration, but we'll skip on the next one. The main characteristic of ATMP, first of all, they are one-shot, patient-specific. That is to say that they require only a single treatment. That's a very important point, because, of course, being one-shot, single treatment, that is to say that the costs are all upfront, while the benefit tend to spread across years and time. They show a high investment cost, but also many benefits for patients. This therapy may provide a long-lasting recovery for patients for the different pathology that this kind of therapy try to cure. Another important point that with respect to for example, the treatment for cancer, this therapy do not alleviate, do not mitigate symptoms, but cure the cause of illness. That's a very important point. Maybe the most important point of the main characteristic of TMP is that this therapy show a high symmetry, timing asymmetry between cost and benefit. Most of the cost, I would say, all the costs are upfront in the year that the government or the health department decide to buy or to acquire the therapy, and the benefit that instead tend to spread in many years. There are many possible direct benefits from this therapy, but I want to be brief. So, for example, if you are not sick, but you are in a in good condition, you increase your life expectancy, you increase your productivity, you are going to work, that may increase the tax revenue for the state. So there are not only important saving in terms of cost, less health expenditure, you don't go to the hospital, but also very good aspect in terms of possible benefit. Now, the key point on the sustainability, this therapy is challenging the sustainability of the care system, of the care. Maybe yes, given the cost, but if the answer is yes, I think that we need to find a new value framework that acknowledge this asymmetry, timing and asymmetry between costs and benefits. Going to the conclusion, what is the main? Yes. Yeah. Okay. What is the main issue that they arise with the public budget? We have that the decision which kind of therapy is worthy of funding. We need to should be done not only by considering the upfront cost, the immediate cost, but also the long-term value to society and to patients. I say again, costs are concentrated in the single initial year, while benefits are instead multi-annual and they spread across time. It's the problem with this aspect, with this characteristic of ATMPs, that the public budget, the procedure, the budgetary procedure we provide public budget is that they use, as you know very well, the accrual basis. In Italian we say competenza economica, and not the cash budget. And if we use accrual basis or accrual budget, of course this is not suitable for ATM therapy, because in a therapy that is concentrated in 1 year, the cost, but the benefits are completely spread over time, to put all or to account only or essentially all the cost of the expenditure in 1 year, the first year, that's of course raise a very, very important or delicate issue. Anyway, therefore I think that at least the next one, this one, thank you. I think that there is also, I read from time to time in the last 2-3 years after COVID-19, that there is a trade-off between health and economy, between good health condition and economy. This is not true, because of course we realized after COVID that without good health condition in our countries, economy will not recover. It's not possible to imagine good GDP growth or the possibility to improve the labor market without good health condition. I was remarking that it was the only one with the mask. That's maybe my problem. In Italy still. But of course, you mentioned that it was the first event. So that is to say 2 years and a half. So imagine, and we were saved given our telephone and our computer and the possibility of call by web and so on. So anyway, let's go. I think that the value of human life, good health, is very important for the growth potential. Without good health condition, there are no possibility of growth potential, or the growth potential it will reduce dramatically. flow benefit for many years and cost saving has to put in accordance. Can we deny that from ATMP, and not only ATMP, let's say also the case of vaccine, we derive an enrichment of the physical, technological, and human capital stock of a nation? Of course, no. The answer is no. But then, if we say yes, we derive an increase of the stock of capital, physical, human, and so on, we have to provide or to give a proper accounting method to take into consideration this new element of environment, health, and so on. Going to the conclusion, these issues that current budgetary procedures are already, I mentioned, on the economic accrual, on the competenza, and not on cash budget. And they fully account, if we have an expenditure, the expenditure has to be accounted, registered in the first year of the spending requirement. Of course, this can be and is an important obstacle to adopt, to allow an annuity payment model, an installment, and a payment model based on installments that, given this aspect of installment or an annuity spread over time, fraction over time, it could be much more opportune and let's say, effective to take into consideration this aspect of the TMP that is what I mentioned before, the timing asymmetry between cost and benefit. Going to really the conclusion, we have, I think that we need the number 11, okay. I think that we need a significant revision of public account criteria. I think the time has come to have the courage, let's say the voluntary, the will to revise or at least in some part the public accounting criteria. I know that there are some skepticism from the European Commission in some working party, and also we have had a look with Giorgio to the some committee, working committee of the Eurostat. From one time, I understand it's true, there are some risk of gravity accounting, of course, because what is the definition of investment? 3 centuries at least of discussion on this point, and we are not able to say the last word. But from the other side, I think that we have to be concrete and realize that we have very important point, especially in the health and the environment sector. And so maybe the next one. My point is that we still have an idea, a concept of capital is completely limited to the economic, not to say the physical dimension. That is to say, machinery, and equipment, so on. I think that the new situation after COVID, and I would say also after the war in Ukraine, I think that the capital is much more elaborated and a complex concept that has to take in consideration and to deal with not only the physical dimension of capital. It was when we were students, unfortunately, 40 years ago, unfortunately, but in the concept of capital, we need to introduce to also have some other component in terms of human, social, and natural. There are some part of the capital that it has to also to deal with human, social, natural, that is to say, environment, health condition, and so on. And of course, the next generation is a very important chance to provide countries and the European area to deal with this issue. I will go on to the end. All these stories say, yes, but we have a country convention. European countries agree on a common set of rules. That is true, okay. But in the end, the accounting conventions is not come from heaven, are a production of a human being, and especially they are result of a compromise, in the end, are an accounting convention. I think that they need, maybe can or must be updated when technological conditions change, evolve, and also when the common feeling of nations and peoples of the European community progress in a very good way. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mary. Oh, this is on, yeah. Just a follow-up question then. The sort of key word that I took from your speech was courage, for people to have courage in revising their accounting, and you spoke about cost versus benefit. But how do you then get struggling healthcare systems when people are looking at their national budgets to actually make this investment, especially because of the pandemic? We've seen that, you know, healthcare systems are completely collapsing. I take the example of, in the UK, the NHS, the National Healthcare System. You know, I've been at hospitals visiting people that I know, and you can't even get a cup of tea. So how are you going to get them to change their minds to have this courage then?
That's a very difficult question. Anyway, the key to consider part of the health sector as an investment, not like a current expenditure. That's a key point. Because if we allow that an increasing part of the health expenditure is an investment, not a current expenditure, that may, of course, tend to produce different outcome on the deficit, the debt, and also the public finances mechanism that the European Commission and the European Union has in the public finances mechanism. I'm not saying that there are not, what you mentioned, the problem of cost to find resources for this assignment, it will be solved. No, not in at all. Maybe we have to increase tax revenue or simply to move from other sector, some financial resources from, let's say, agriculture or other, I don't know, to health sector. So the budget constraint is still there, and I agree. But the problem is that we have an idea on a concept, on a dimension of investment and current expenditure, a capital expenditure that is completely out of date, and we need to update it to the different situation that we have after COVID-19, and especially after this breaking technological development in the health sector. Not only ATMP, advanced therapy, but also vaccine and so on. There are a lot of cell therapies. There are a lot of new health treatment that show this element of much more investment than current expenditure. I hope that's
Thank you so much. And obviously I invite Professor Murray to take part in our discussion if you want to comment on what our panelists say. Okay, well, let's open up our panel debate then. Oh, okay. Well, we'll see you in a little bit later. Thank you so much. Okay, so taking part in our panel discussion, we have Pascalia Kufakotsu, who is the Policy Officer at the European Commission's DG Sante, Unit D1, Medical Products, Quality, Safety and Innovation. Welcome to you. We have Sarah Garner, who's joining us online. She's a Senior Policy Advisor, Access to Medicines and Health Products at the World Health Organization, Regional Office for Europe, who is joining us remotely. We have Giorgio Eleva, Professor of Statistics at the University of Rome and former President of the Italian National Institute of Statistics. Welcome to you too. We have also Andrula Elefthuru, who is the Executive Director of Thalassemia International Federation and Director, Cyprus WHO Collaborating Centre of the Cyprus Ministry of Health, who also joins us remotely. Thank you for taking part. And then last but not least, we have Jasna Karicic, who's the President of the Croatian Association for the Promotion of Patient Rights, who also served as Health Attaché during the Croatian presidency of the Council of the European Union. We are having a little bit of technical difficulties with one of our panelists, but we will carry on. Hope that they can rejoin us. Okay, so panelists, let me first kick things off with a temperature check on what Professor Murray did say. Yes, thank you, gentlemen, for stop speaking amongst yourselves. What did you make of his opening address? Pascalia Kufakotsu, I'll go to you first.
Hello, everyone. Thanks to organizers for inviting the Commission to participate in this panel. I would like to make a general comment there is one one line of thinking across this capital investment versus current investing. Obviously, DigiSante is not the best to address this issue. It is extremely complex, but I understand the logic that since a lot of R&D investment is required for ATMPs, then you do upfront the investment and then you expect to re-up the benefits in the future. Although I can understand the logic, I cannot have a strong, firm opinion if this is right or wrong. And of course, there are other services departments in the Commission that are more appropriate to address this question. The European Framework for Accounting is the framework where the economy of the member states is framed. For the other parts of what are the factors that influence patient access to ATMPs, I can develop some points if you would like right now or later.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So I would like to make 4 points. The first one is that due to many layers of complexity of these products, the clinical evidence at the level, at the time of marketing authorization is not what we would like to have. So there are many post-market obligations. One is this, one problem. But in addition to that, there is a problem that the payers, the healthcare system, reimbursement, they want to raise, to see the cost effectiveness of these treatments. So the question is, what is the evidence? How you generate the evidence? Until now, in the regulatory mindset, the randomized controlled trials was the gold standard. But for the particular case of the ATMPs, it seems that it's not enough. So there is a new thinking now that the randomized controlled trials, which on many occasions are impossible due also to ethical limitations, can be combined with real-world data. But of course, the real-world data, the real-world evidence is subject to a number of limitations. First of all, the availability. How do you get the access to this data? Other issues are the quality, the completeness, the extent to which these data are complete. And also, there is the problem that you have to have some kind of comparability between the real-world data and the data that you get from the trials. But there are good news to address all these new issues that are attached to the real-world evidence. One is the demand from the reimbursement, the health systems of the member states, that they want to demonstrate what is the cost effectiveness of the new therapies. The other is the demand for the patients, that they want to have access to these innovative therapies fast. But also a third factor that is also good news is that there is this mindset shift for between the regulators that we should not have this dilemma, randomized control trials versus real-world data, but rather go to a combination of these. So that's one. The second is that I'm not so pessimist for the HTA, health technology assessment regulation. We believe that the access to joint clinical assessment scientific reports will advance the decisions at national level, and also I believe that we believe in the Commission that it will also be beneficial for the developers, as there will be a kind of predictability of what is the clinical evidence that the HTA bodies will need to take into account. The third point is that for the revision of the pharma legislation, of course, the proposal, I don't know exactly what will be the time of the announcement, but as the starting point for this proposal, for the revision for the pharma legislation, is the communication, the pharma strategy, and there the Commission has made commitments. First, to revise the incentives, and there will be a distinction in the incentives in relation to the innovative therapies, and a second, which is relevant to the discussion that we have today, is that the revision of the pharma legislation would try to accommodate also the cutting-edge products like the ATMPs, the scientific developments, but also what I said, I spoke previously about the real-world data, that in the revised pharma legislation will be more clear how the regulators will take advantage of this data. And the fourth point I would like to make is that for the role of the academia, because many of these ATMPs are also prepared in hospital settings, and they are offered at, they are produced at much lower price than the centrally authorized ATMPs, and the European Medicine Agency has different instruments in order to support the academic development of ATMPs. And recently they have published, they have released in the press about this pilot project. And also there is an exemption pathway in the EU legislation, and within the revision of the pharma legislation, we are looking into this. So that's, thank you.
Thank you. Well, a follow-up question then. You talked there about creating demand, but how can you have demand if the product isn't actually available to the patient? And another thing I want to raise with the European Medicines Agency says they're going to approve 10 to 20 new ATMPs every year from 2025. So how is this then going to translate to access of patients?
Thank you. For the demand, when there is increasing awareness, the question about the demand from the patients. Yes, I think that there is an increasing awareness that for the availability of these therapies. We are talking about, on many occasions, life-saving therapies. So that it's obvious that there will be demand for these patients, especially there are some groups, they are very much aware, like, for example, for cancer patients, CAR T-cell therapies are very effective, and yes, I think that there is increasing awareness about the effectiveness of these therapies. For the second, actually, these figures are not coming from the agency, because the agency, it's more, I think they originate from an article, a scientific article, where of course there were representatives from the agency, but the agency is very prudent when they announce the figures and statistics, so we can only stick to the fact that until now we have 23 centrally authorized ATMPs, but not all of them are in the market, because some of them, the companies have decided already to withdraw the market authorization due to commercial factors. These figures come from the Alliance for Regenerative Medicines, which is an organization which represents the ATMP sector, the industry, and also from the FDA commissioner. How we go to the points that I developed before is the answer to this part, how we are going to address looking into the real world evidence and how to accommodate this, to have solid evidence of the efficacy, because there are two perspectives. We have the regulators who give the license to the ATMPs, and they look to the quality, safety, and efficacy, and based on these three criteria, they make a benefit-risk assessment balance. And then we have the health technology assessment bodies, which of course they see also to the efficacy to the patients, but they also look into factors like effectiveness and efficiency in terms of the resources. So if we manage to engage the regulators and the HTA bodies, that will help. Don't know if my colleague would like to complement. Okay, no. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so to build on what you were just saying then, Sarah Garden, I'll come to you, our online speaker. So building on that, what are there then to ensure that these investments aren't wasted and that products actually reach the consumer?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for not being able to be there in person. A very good question. So this is an incredibly important topic that we're discussing. We have a pipeline that's full of potentially curative products. We wouldn't have them unless the significant investment by the public sector and the private sector, by both, and we need to celebrate this as a success. But it really is a wasted investment if they're not actually reaching the patients. So it's an incredibly important area. A few points I wanted to pick up on from the previous presentations. We can't assume that these products are going to stay with small numbers of patients. They could expand to larger populations of other diseases. So given the amount of products in the pipeline, we have to find a way fairly urgently to deal with it. And we know the current system of exception is leaving a lot of unmet need, because when these products become available and competition enters the market, then we see an expansion in the number of products sold. So we know already the mechanisms that we have for dealing with high cost medicines are not sufficient, and it leaves a lot of patients with their needs not being met. I think the previous speakers already said it, these products are incredibly disruptive, and that's the point of these products. They're potential cures, they innovate, they're innovations. So we must find a way to deal with them, and we've got some of the challenges already being addressed. So the regulatory challenges, the delivery challenges, but there are more. And the one we're talking about today, the cost of them, I think is the biggest challenge, not only for the healthcare systems, but also for society as a whole. And particularly where increasing public spending is not a priority for any government at any time. So we have to think about this. And for my very simple, I'm not an economist, but if we want to continue these innovative pipelines to have these novel medicines, and I think as a society we're all agreed that we do, we have to have money, more money coming out than we're putting in. And the question for me is, where does that money come from? Does it come from the health budgets, or are we looking at this as a societal issue and we need to think more broadly? And that's me as a non-economist, a very, very simple view on this. Uncertainty, I think, is another big issue. We've heard about that from the previous speaker, but we need to put it into perspective. If these products were £30,000, €30,000 per patient, we wouldn't be having this conversation about the uncertainty. It's an issue because the costs are so high, or it's a particular issue because the costs are so high, and there is a lack of transparency about why those costs are so high, and that's what the payer organisations are telling us. They want some justification as to why we've hit this levels of expenditure. And this we've talked about value frameworks. So is this an appropriate way of looking at these, looking at the long-term value of them to the healthcare system? So we need to think about budget impact as well. And I support the call for a new value framework. And then the pharmaceutical expenditure, there always comes a discussion about pharmaceutical expenditure versus investment in other sectors. And we have to recognise in this very complicated debate that the public and private sectors are so intertwined. So many governments have a lot of industry in their countries, and also certain pension funds are invested in the pharmaceutical industry. So there's some perverse incentives acting to oppose things that the healthcare system are. Then sometimes we need to think more broadly about the macroeconomic benefits. And again, I have a very simple view on this. I came from the UK healthcare system, that the budgets that the governments use for the healthcare system, that they set for the healthcare system, the intent is to deliver health in that year. So if we want to broaden it out, we need to think again about the absolute value of those budgets. So just briefly, a couple of remarks on the paper. I'd like to really congratulate the authors, Professor Mario and colleagues, for thinking through. It's really timing critical, and it's a very elegant solution to deal with the upfront costs. It's very well thought through. So it solves one issue, is how do we actually transactionally pay for this, and it's been well thought through. But for me, as a representative of WHO Euro, we can't lose sight of the bigger picture, which is, one, can we work together to reverse the trajectory of costs? So again, should we be questioning why we're spending, why these costs so much, asking for more transparency about the cost contributions to the different parts of the innovation process? How do we better collaborate to find solutions? We've got some great ideas on the table. Today's is one of them. So how do we have a forum for debating and taking forward those solutions that enables the public and private sector to come together? And not forgetting that all of these proposals are quite administratively very heavy. And this is what the payers, the healthcare systems are telling us, that a lot of burden goes onto the healthcare systems. So we're going to have investment on that, and investment on data collection, and also the role of transparency in this whole debate. If we're, as public sector, we're trying to find ways of paying for these medicines, how can we increase transparency on both sides so we better understand the cost drivers? And then just something in WHO Europe that we're really committed to supporting these discussions and try and find solutions. And in September, the health ministers from 53 of our member states met in Tel Aviv, this is the WHO member states, and agreed that WHO Euro should act as the neutral broker and develop a platform and roadmap to enable those conversations to happen between the public and private sector. We're really, again, on behalf of WHO, you're on behalf of the Regional Director, Hans Kluger, we're really committed, express a commitment to finding solutions. And I'll hand back and say thank you.
And thank you for highlighting the role of the WHO. So we're hearing from all the panelists, and they're really talking about, where does the money come from? How do you bring these costs down? Professor Eleva, what would be the advantage of reclassifying ATMPs as investments rather than expenditures?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank to the organizer for this initiative. That is a good occasion for sharing the work we did with the Vita Group. We tried to deepen how to increase significantly the financial sustainability of this cost and to promote greater and equitable use in the population of the ATMPs. Professor Marais already explained that a key point is the possibility for classification of this cost as investments. And so a crucial point that we try to deepen is how, taking into account the current national system of account, make possible this change, and technical issues that it's important to face, to find answers, and how long we have to wait for this change. So the why is a possibility to amortize this cost in several years instead to put in the state budget only in the year of expenditure. And this is possible for investments. So the point is to discuss about the enlargement of the perimeter of investment, considering that in the history of the national accounts, there are ordinary revisions of the rules. And since the 90s, this history is the history of enlargement of the perimeter of investments. According to the scientific and institutional debate, and according also what happened in the private sector, because intangible investment are a great part of the value of an enterprise. The value of an enterprise is also its human capital, its social responsibility. This is the value of this company. So how to align in the budget of the state the new value of the human development, health, education, etc. And Professor Marais specified this direction. Well, innovation, we have international national accounts. No? It's crucial, the comparison of the accounts, and it's a great value to share this point. So innovation in the compilation can be introduced in two different ways. By modifying the regulation or updating its interpretation. And achieving these results needs a strong conviction on the part of the European Parliament, because we need a push for reflect on the opportunity of changes in one of these two different ways. And I already say that the history of the revision is the enlargement of the perimeter of investments, and therefore decisive for the future of the country and its economic sustainability. Advanced therapies could be considered, at least in part, as investment expenditure. Deepening this issue, now we are very convinced about this opportunity, this value for the society. And we of course, to modify the regulation is a long process that comes from the Parliament or the European Commission that make a proposal that enter in the agenda of the Country Working Party of the Statistics, composed by the president of the National Statistical Institute, that amend the proposal, and there is a negotiation with the Parliament and the Commission. It's a long process, but it's possible, and is always pushed from the Parliament or the Council. Instead, the interpretation of a different classification of an expenditure, it's not so long, and this implies a Eurostat opinion. This means that always with a proposal, there is a technical evaluation from the keepers of the rules about this new interpretation. And this happened in many times. So we try to deepen the technical points to make possible the different classification of this expenditure according to the current regulation. I don't think now it's the occasion to enunciate these technical points, but we should say so that it's possible to face these points and to try to open the discussion. That should come from the Parliament that represent the citizens, their needs, and so from this point of view, we need of courage to push in this direction. Well, so there are these two different ways, and one is a long time way, but it's possible. The other is shorter. But in any case, I don't think that the change will come from the keepers of the rules, I mean the accounters. So we have to try to push this issue.
So then, to follow up then, who is going to lead that change? Where does that change come from within the EU bubble?
Sorry?
Where does the change come from within the EU bubble?
Yes, from here.
From here, okay. Okay, so yes, okay, just let me come to you now. Sorry, re-mic myself, sorry. I know you've waited a while to speak. So if we could take the example of Croatia, talk to us a little bit about what the access is like in your country.
Yes, have a start my thoughts with the question, does life have a price? Because that is always what I have in my mind, how much life costs, what is the value of the life? And because the situation is very difficult today. I can see by two different approaches, because I worked as a diplomat, and following that I am the patient ombudsman, someone who will protect the patient rights. So I was always in the situation to discuss about possibilities and how to treat the patients and ensure the quality and the money for all. Because Croatia is a small country, but we have a public health, also Tomislav before mentioned that we have public health, and everybody can access to the hospital, for example, without extra payment. But we are not rich enough to provide the advanced therapies and expensive drugs. And that is the very big problem. And also not only money. In Croatia is the problem low literacy, and that patients are not, they cannot understand very well possibilities about treatments, and they don't know how to access to the information, right to information, what is the one of the most important thing. And so we faced really with the inequalities in the aspects of the patient rights. and to right for the treatment, the right to access to the health care. And also, so patient individually, every patient needs to find solution for their treatments. And we had before 2 years one really sad situation with when the government had to balance who will be on a priority list to be treated. So how we can choose a person with cancer, blood cancer or breast cancer or some other disease like spinal muscular atrophy. And we had a manifestation from the parents in Croatia because these drugs wasn't on the list. And they had to find private donations so to be in experimental group. And the one, my colleague for the government, he said, okay, how I can be sure that I can give only for one patient, one small child, 1 million euros, and he will just move a little bit finger. And that was really very sad and stressful. And in the same time, I can treat 10 patients, and they will be after in fully working condition. And these are the situation really sad how to choose who will be treated. And I'm not sure that we found the solution. How to be chosen? Who is the God to decide who will be treated? And of course, the framework for reimbursement is not equal to all European countries. Somebody mentioned before, and Mariano, I think you mentioned, because the reimbursement, everybody need to have possibility to discuss about reimbursement. And of course, the cross-border healthcare, the directive or commission is that every patient has the right to go to other country to treatment if it's not possible in our country. Countries low income, of course, they cannot provide full treatment. In the same time, so the many complaints are also addressed to the Court of Human Rights, and the patients make complaints that they don't have a right to treatment. And also what I can say, during the presidency, Croatian presidency of the Council of the EU, we had a very big, we were prepared very well for the patient rights and the safety for quality of life, healthy aging, and everything. And of course, we faced with the COVID. So for us, it was the beginning and the practically end of this, the most important decisions for the COVID. And this situation also show us importance for this chronic disease, and many patients died because there were not it was not possible in the hospital lockdown. It was not possible to access to the hospital, to the doctors, to the treatment. And of course, this shows even more important was to protect the patient rights generally in this situation. And that is also questions what are the lessons learned in this situation.
I think also you did answer when you were basically talking about, what is the cost of or the value of human life, and it just comes down to money. So let's pick up on that then. What would you say about changing accounting rules to implement innovative payment models? Is that a solution?
Definitely, the future presidencies need to open these questions more actively, and to be in collaboration with Commission and the Parliament more, and to discuss more from scientific research to effective and to merge, because I like always to merge science with the values and effectiveness, and this is the only way if we have a good evidence-based background to take messages from that. and then that we can proactively use it in the everyday practice in clinical evidence. And this is also a message for the future presidents, that they need to take care about patient rights, about inequalities, what we are facing really with the big differences between the European countries, and this is something what we cannot accept.
Thank you so much. Professor Lever, coming back to you then. So we're discussing, of course, about accounting rules and payment models. The definitions and conventions used in national accounts are, in fact, international. Is it possible to find a national approach given the current European accounting rules, and how could any change be achieved? Would you like to comment?
No. I want to be sure there was for him, not for me.
I think that I clarified that the system of accounts is European, is international. And there is also a very clear connection with the international system of the UN and the EU system. So at national level, you can only promote in that environment changes, but you have to share level at European level. So this is not a national point, the change of national accounts. Of course, it's different to find solution for thinking to spread the cost over the time. And this is a possibility. We are also studying this way. This is not a change in the system of accounts, but could help to make more sustainable from a financial point of view these expenses.
Yeah, please go ahead, yeah.
If I could say, I think that we need, apart from technical, statistical issues that are very difficult and also economic, here there is a key political dimension. The Maastricht criteria are very important. I think there have been a key element to have some public finances to promote growth, to avoid opportunistic behaviors. But in the end, after COVID, they disappear. They was completely suspended. So that is not to say that we are free to get how much deficit we want. No, that's not my point, of course, especially being Italian. Let's all be sure to be sure on this point. It's the problem that when conditions basically change, we need to understand that something that we have a new world ahead of us. So it's a long process. We have a technical, statistical dimension, also economic, but I think that apart from this, there is, of course, the political will of national government and the European Commission.
Sarah Gardner, we'll come back to you now. You've always been listening into what the other panellists have been saying, talking about public spending being a bit of a problem right now. I mean, we can even take the example again of the UK government. Look what Liz Truss tried to do, and now she's left government as the shortest-serving British Prime Minister in history, so far at least. So is there a solution then to manage the cost of ATMPs?
It is, I think for me, this is such a complex issue. The solutions don't lie just within the healthcare systems, and they don't lie within one player. And that, for me, the key thing is to really think as a system across the different parts, like how do we want to move forward with this issue? How do we distribute the gains equally across the system? And how do we actually pay for them? Should they come out of the healthcare budgets? Should we think about them as a bigger investment by society? And should they actually be the costs that we're being asked for them? And I'm just like, I think Professor Mario talked about tanks and grenades and investment. And if we think about the analogy that if we were to start costing tanks and grenades as to the amount of lives saved or some other metric, how complicated that would get. And we've somehow gone down that route with the value frameworks for the medicines. So for me, it's now, is it now time to rebalance and just say, okay, we want these products, we want to pay for them. How do we do with them? And given the amount of demand and unmet need we have, what is a fair price for them? And that discussion is not happening at the moment, as I see it. We have segmented discussions, but I would ask for a multi-stakeholder discussion and multi-sector discussion. Over.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Kufakotsu, then I'll come to you then. Given what the other panelists have been talking about today, given what they're proposing, where can you actually see this conversation going within the kind of EU bubble?
Thanks for the question. Well, as I said before, for the part of the proposal concerning reclassification of the spending for ATMP, it's beyond our remit. Let's put it like this. But although I understand the logic behind this, I have also two questions. How do you define the number of years that you write off these? Because of course it will be taken out from budget constraint, but as the professor said, there is a scientific question about the number of years, but also what is the volume of the ATMP spectrum in order to have a material impact in the future. But concerning other aspects of advancing the advanced therapies in Europe, I hope that with the revision of the pharma legislation, with entry into application of the HTA regulation, with the shift of thinking into what matters in terms of clinical evidence, and with the academic support of ATMP developers, I think all these will advance the sector. Thank you.
Okay, I'm quite keenly aware that we have about 10 minutes left. Just as anyone has any questions, anyone here have any questions? I've got any hands? Does anyone have any questions for any of the panelists? Okay, I'll let you think about your questions. There's enough of you in the room. I'm sure you guys, yep, please go ahead.
Well, I'm afraid it's not really a question. I'm Sylvain Giraud. I work with Lina in the European Commission. I'm the head of unit medical products. And I would just like to comment and also compliment and agree with what Lina just said. I think our impression at this stage is not so much that the reason why member states or national authorities or national health systems would not engage into payment as much as you think they should. I don't think it's an issue that has to do with accounting or an issue that has to do with the way the accounting system is in place or the way capital investment is counted or whether they consider this as an investment or a short-term cost. I think because the reality is shown that when they have to spend on health, they do spend on health. This is what I think you were just saying, Professor Mara, a few minutes ago. Basically, you know, when there is a health issue, and then they spend. So it's not that they don't want to spend. I think it has to be more with the elements that both Lina and Sarah highlighted, which is there are uncertainties in relation to the clinical effectiveness, and that this clinical effectiveness is something that needs to be measured and demonstrated across a longer process. There are questions, as Sarah said, on the actual level of the price and how much it is linked or not linked to costs, and there's lack of transparency on that. There are also uncertainties in relation to the clinical effectiveness compared to what already exists, compared to what health systems wants to do of its money. and a public health policy that is there. And I think, Ms. Karadzic, you referred to that very, very clearly. So clearly, there are uncertainties. So saying it's all there and they should pay, as I caricature what was said, of course it's not what was said, is maybe a bit too fast. And the legitimate concerns of payers, health systems, health insurances is there, and it needs to be taken into account. There are also very legitimate concerns from not so much from a budgetary point of view, I would say from a public health point of view.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room has a question or a comment? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Dariusz Adamczewski, Johnson & Johnson. So I'm the part of the industry, and as MEP Sokol kindly mentioned, there is no way forward without the industry. I humbly agree with that point. But yeah, more or less, I must say I agree with the points raised before. Maybe sometimes the solutions proposed by the industry are slightly different. However, the need of adaptation of regulatory practices, especially clinical trials and real-world evidence, to be accepted, to address this uncertainty that you mentioned before is needed. Then value assessment framework that will address also the uncertainty and clearly the amplification and emphasis of real-world evidence really to support the decision-making, but also to address the limitations in the evidence, address the limitations and the lack of population we could compare to. This is also the clear point. Also what has been today mentioned, that innovative payment models are needed to address. Funny to hear myself.
Oh, was that you?
No, yeah? No, it was an echo, actually. Yeah, but innovative payment models are needed to address this one-shot therapies that bring the solutions not only for healthcare problem, but also address and offset a lot of social costs. But I would like to mention also two issues that haven't been mentioned today. One is insurance of the accessibility of genetic testing, simply to prepare the patient, and genetic counseling at the same time, to prepare the patient and to be ready for the therapy. And finally, last but not least, also optimize cross-border healthcare, especially for small patient populations, really remove barriers to patients' mobility to get the therapy across the EU is also very important. So we are also here together with whole community, and we are ready to discuss and to co-create the very concrete solutions that will address these problems. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Good to have the industry perspective there. Professor Murray, we'll come back to you now. Your sort of final thoughts, given you are our keynote speaker. Please go ahead.
I thank for your comments, and I agree that in the final decision on health or any priority on public expenditure is a national decision, also at the European level, of course, but in the end, especially in some items like healthcare or social security and so on, is a national priority. But my feel is that we have to distinguish between good expenditure and less good expenditure. If an expenditure has essentially or in large part an investment characteristic, we know very well that it can be able to boost the economy, increase the rate of growth. I mean, it's and also deal from an accounting point of view differently. It is true, you are right, that the first the first level is not an accounting level. That I agree completely. But there is also an accounting level, because when we try to discuss, at least at scientific level, academic level, the answer from my national government, but also from other governments, is that, yes, of course, you are right, ATMP, vaccine, and whatever you want, environment is, of course, show an element investment, but the common accounting rule, the budgetary procedure in the European Union are very clear on that point. We have to distinguish between current and capital. It's true, in the end, it's a national priority. We can decide to reduce the wage to the teachers, to move from infrastructure to health system. That could be maybe the only solution. But of course, I think that there is not only a scientific or statistical point. We have to consider health or education for what they are, but also to give a chance to all the European state members to have the opportunity to increase in a very, very important sector like ATMP or vaccine and so on, or cell therapies, the chance to have common rules and to share with other countries the possibility to see the key element of investment of this expenditure.
Thank you so much for your contributions today. Since we have our MEP back, MP Sokol, would you like to say some final thoughts as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for interesting discussion. I was able to hear part of it, but I was informed about the other discussions which took place when I was absent. So I would like to emphasize some things which I thought are important. First is to look at healthcare as an investment. I think that's a really paradigmatic shift. And especially in terms of policymakers making decisions, because they usually only perceive this as a cost. Also, European Union, especially during the last financial crisis 10 years ago, also perceived healthcare primarily as a cost through austerity measures and country-specific recommendations, etc. That's been changing. So the European semester has been changing in this sense in the last several years. So now it's actually more focused on the actual health objectives and outcomes than just looking at how to cut costs. So I think that this change is going on. I think that this is very important, and this should be applied horizontally to think of all the benefits of better health care, better health for the population, better health outcomes for influencing policy decision making. That is crucial. I also was informed that a lot of discussion was also about the academia. I think that's also important, the role of academia. I come from academia. I think it's very important in terms of developing new medical technologies. So this is something that should definitely be fully supported. And of course, the question is, what can we do, and what the member states can do, and how we can influence decision making by the member states. I think there's a lot of interaction there. There is much more influence on part of the European Union than it was before, but I think we have still a long way to go. And I think we can do a lot in terms of, from European level, on influencing national decision making without going outside of the competences of the EU. So thank you very much for coming here. I hope it was interesting, and I think we heard a lot of interesting things today, and we will continue to fight for better healthcare in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, and just before we leave, just some final words from Mariano Botta. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the panelists. Thanks, Sokol, the representative of the institutions. The idea to organize this meeting, it was to identify the patchways. That is, even if across Europe we found a Ministry of Health potentially interested to explore the feasibility of this kind of solution, the answer is try to interact with Eurostat, because we have to follow the Eurostat rules. So speaking with Eurostat say that it's a political issue, this kind of change, as the professor said. And the European Commission said in the DG ECFIN are probably not too much comfortable to identify patient advocacy groups are their stakeholder, and say, please, also talk with DG Santé. And we are now in touch with the institutions. We probably identify, if we stay all patients here, in these patchways, National Ministry of Health, Eurostat, DG, another DG. In the middle, we find EMA ready to approve new. So all the doubts are legitimate, but we take in mind also approved therapies and patients that meantime listen that there is a potential solution for me. And now it's time to change something. And this is crucial. And so the requirement is to please identify a way in which citizens and patients can interact with all the stakeholders that are in charge to try a solution on this. This is the message. Even if it's not in my pocket, can you please open the dialogue with your colleagues, or we stay in a silos approach? I don't find it that this is the point. But we need, in a very concrete way, to identify how we can explore new solutions for the benefit of the European citizens that still agree that Europe is crucial for our life. This is the message today. After that, we can talk about next step. We can enlarge much more patient advocacy group. That is, in the last 6 weeks, and we thank the European Parliament, we have listed the Transform event. This event, 29th of November, another one from the Regenerative Medicine Alliance, all talking about advanced therapy. That is key. Great. According to me, what is still lacking is the leading role of the patient advocacy groups. Too few patient advocacy groups are aware about it. Our commitment is probably to need to increase the number of the people, the patient advocacy groups involved on the topic. To do what? Not only to better represent the situation in my life, in my country, etc. Today we have invited also a representative of the Senate of the Republic in Italy that was impossible probably to connect, because like in Europe there is Transform, an interest group on member of European Parliament interested to discuss, to open the dialogue, to reflect, to exchange ideas. Also in Italy there is an interest group focused on innovation in health, in which also this topic is debated. And we can probably open this kind of interest group in Croatia, in Romania, in other countries. Why not? This could be also our commitment as a citizens and patient advocacy groups. I announced that we will continue to work on the topic, and we are happy to announce that the next European Patient Rights Day, the 17th edition, will be focused on advanced therapy. Because, of course, we need to fight in a collaborative approach, of course, but open the door to the ones who still do not recognize also the patient advocacy groups as one of the stakeholders in their context. So, sorry for this final remarks, but when we work, we are very passionate about the issues that are linked with the daily life of the citizens, European patients. And now, we have probably no more time because there is another meeting. No, because the Senate of the Republic from Italy, it was ready to be connected. 1 minute more for my acknowledgement, because I have to thank the member of European Parliament, Sokol, all the panelists, all my staff, so grazie a Bianca, Daniela, Maddalena, Ginevra. I want to thank also the Czech presidency of the Council for the patronage. Let me remember that the event has been realized with the unconditional support of VITA, already mentioned, Value of Innovation Advanced Therapy Coalition, which includes Bristol Myers Squibb, Gilead Science, Janssen, Pfizer, PTC Therapeutics, Roche, Vertex, a coalition which is coordinated by Let's Cube Global Law Firm led by Rosanna that I thank, together with her very valuable team and consultants. For the ones interested to know our next appointment, will be here. It's 15th of November to talk about antimicrobial resistance. Meantime, stay safe and goodbye. Arrivederci.